welcome to the Stockbridge Assessors meeting of Thursday, November the 17th. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Good morning. So the first one, last minute meetings, the last meeting minutes, I'm sorry, it's gonna be one of those days. Everything that's listed for the certification, the classification, the new growth, we touched on at our last meeting, but now we have firm numbers and dates on everything. So I'll go right into number 2, final certification of fiscal year 23, 5-year certification. So we've been talking about the property certification, or also known as the reval, for some time now, all the way through the summer into the fall. And as of Monday, we have our final preliminary numbers are now our final valuations for fiscal year 23. And there was a public disclosure that took place over the last few weeks. And we had to submit to the Department of Revenue for our final valuations in order to move forward with our new growth certification and setting the tax classification hearing and then eventually getting the tax rate set. So that went through smoothly, and we do have the recommendations that they send for the next 5 years, which really are no different than what they typically send. And I do have that in our file. So we were all set in our valuations, which brought us to number 3. Once our valuations are set, we're basically in a typical year now. So the reval is finished, the values are set, and we submit the LA4 and the LA13. LA4 is a document that will list by class every single property in that class, the value associated with that property. And that's basically our Bible for doing the tax bills and the commitment book. So that was certified as well. And the LA13 it's an itemization of all of the new growth that Stockbridge is submitting for fiscal year 23. And I have that number. So we submitted a total valuation increase due to construction, personal property pickups, new item pickups on personal property, utility valuation changes. So we picked up $9,110,425. That relates in taxes to around $85,000 new in tax dollars that is added to the it's added to the tax levy calculation. It's not added to the actual amount that we're raising, because we have a very large levy capacity over last year's. It's close to 1.5 million. So basically the small amount of new growth, yes, it's great to have, almost $10 million in new valuation. The $85,000 is added to the Proposition 2.5 amount that we can pick up over last year's levy. We will then use that the state uses that to make sure that we're not going over our levy limit through the amount that we need to run the town. And we are very much below that level at this point. So now that we had the LA13 finished, we now were able to set up the tax classification hearing, of which is tonight at 6:30 in this building. And I believe in this office, this meeting room. Once the tax classification hearing is over with, we then can submit the fiscal year 23, and this brings us to number 4, recap sheet, which is basically an itemization of everything that's happening in Stockbridge from January, which is our assessment date for studying the sales that happened last year, all the way through our financials, our new growth, the classification as far as what is in each group of residential, commercial, industrial, personal property, and I'll go into that further tonight. And that brought us to being able to get to what we feel is a pretty good concrete number for our tax rate. So last year's tax rate was certified at $9.38. And this year we will be presenting at the tax classification hearing a tax rate of $8.14, which is quite a bit of a drop. But that also reflects a few things. The main factor in that is the increase in the assessments. And if you were to look and do a comparison, a total comparison, not by class, but a total of the valuation that we had last year versus the valuation that we have this year, in an amazing, what seems incredible number, our tax levy has increased by close to 150 million. Now that type of increase, when you're still pretty consistent on your overall budget, which I believe was around maybe little under 4% increase, and we're actually funding our estimated receipts over our actual receipts to 85% this year. Mike Canales and our accountant Cheryl and Erica and everyone involved in the tax rate, we all looked at that very closely to make sure that we could get the tax rate and keep the tax rate as low as it feasibly can go with that amount of value being added to the actual LA4. And it resulted again in a tax rate of 814. That isn't in stone. Typically when we submit, there might be a rounding issue, which is adjusted through the overlay number of, a few $100s, which could bring it up by a penny, bring it down by a penny, but we're still confident it's going to be in that range. And historically, that's probably the biggest dip we've ever had in our tax rate. So in the end, if you're looking at your tax bill, and we've had the new valuations available for a few weeks now. And again, I want to stress that even though the public disclosure period is over with, that doesn't mean you can't inquire about your assessment at any time by email, phone call, or in person. We'd be happy to go over your record card with you and show you the difference between what happened last year and what changes we made this year. And we still continue to do that from the 954 notices that we sent out to everyone that was outside of the area. We're still getting a few phone calls, but actually those phone calls were not that excessive. There still might be some that are still getting them in the mail. But again, you have every opportunity still right up until your tax bill goes out, and even after your tax bill goes out, which is the actual appeal process, to inquire about your valuation. What we have been telling people that call and are questioning the increase in their assessment is really wait until you get your tax bill, because that is going to be the tell-all as to what we really did in the town. Yes, the valuations went up, but that's solely based on sales that happened last year. That was a strict review that was done by the DOR. They were happy with what we did, and we felt there was a lot of work put into getting those numbers to where they needed to be for market value. But in the end, even with an increase, the tax rate going down as much as it is, it's important to really take a look at your tax bill this year and compare it to your tax bill from last year. And we can easily do that calculation for you. And you may be really surprised to see that, it could either stay the same, be a slight increase, or in some cases go down. There are definitely going to be those higher end properties, and some of the ones that are in the areas where we've made some changes to the land influence factors there's no doubt about it, and I won't sugarcoat it, that we'll see a substantial increase and have seen a substantial increase in their valuation that could definitely relate to a much higher tax in the end. But again, it's not going to be as severe as it normally would if we were hovering around that tax rate that we had last year. So I feel that, Stockbridge is a rare community where not only can your valuation go up, the tax rate can go down and you can actually pay less than what you did the year before.
Yeah. So Michael, with that being said, if you look, so the rate isn't a rate per 1,000 of assessment.
Yes.
So last year, the rate was $9.38. Mm-hmm. So if someone was to go onto the website, look up their valuation, and let's say it was 500,000, all they're going to do is take the 500 which represents thousands. 500 times the 938 should be pretty close to what their tax bill was last year.
Yes,
And then they could take their new assessment that they see right there, multiply that, divide it by 1,000, then multiply that by $8.14.
Yep.
I think a lot of people are going to be surprised with the possibility of what the new tax bill is.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of discussion about increases, but the bottom line is that I think there's going to be a lot of people very happy with the tax bill.
I think so. And again, this is something that at the beginning of the year, we knew, and we haven't kept this a secret. We've been addressing this at many of our meetings of the impact of what last year's number of sales and the selling prices of those sales was going to do to the valuations this year. And at that point, of course, the town meeting is in May, and we always try to get an idea of what the tax rate's going to be that early on. But what I always tell people is, our valuations, the town's valuations overall are really the missing piece in that equation that is going to determine where we are when the tax bills go out. So it's always so early at the beginning of the year. We can estimate, we used to have budget workshop meetings where we would have the state come out to give us an idea. And they would always stress, wait until you see what the tax rate's going to come in. And that's going to be the valuations are our final piece. And it was no different this year. The valuations, as high as they were, definitely brought that tax rate down. If we were in a situation where the budget was higher and we were paying for all these massive projects through raise and appropriate without addressing, maybe taking money out of other available funds and free cash, we'd be in a terrible situation where not only did our valuations go up, but the tax rate went up. And that has happened in actually nearby communities, and I won't mention any names, but that has happened. So I feel that very confident, of what was happening this year based off of last year. It's hard to predict what's going to happen next year, but in this situation, with the tax rate going as low and everyone that's in place to make sure the tax rate stays low, I think we're in a very good situation. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when they get their tax bills, hopefully in December.
Great.
Okay. So do you want to do number 5? Want to just follow through on number 5? Do we have anyone zoomed in? Okay.
We do. I'm trying to figure out what's the number over there.
There's 3 on there.
Okay. So we'll go right into number 5. So I have prepared a document for the classification hearing, which is given to the select board members prior to the tax classification. And it's going to be available to anybody that wants a copy. And it is basically the same format that we use every year, updated with obviously the new rate that we are thinking we're going to have voted. But at the same time, the only thing that's missing from that document is the recommendations on the keeping a single tax rate or splitting the commercial, industrial, personal property with the residential tax rate and shifting the burden. There's also the residential tax exemption and small commercial exemption, of which I typically put in the documentation a recommendation by the Board of Assessors. If you're looking for that in the actual document, it's not there because we actually didn't think that the classification was going to be this week. We thought it was going to be next week or the week after, in which the board was going to be meeting on next Monday. So we've actually changed our meeting date today so that can be addressed, and I can address that at the actual meeting tonight.
And on that note, Mike, so our regular meeting that we were going to have Monday, the 21st, will be canceled.
Exactly.
And this meeting is taking its place as well as doing the work that we needed to do for the meeting tonight.
Yes. So,
Mike, can we see who's,
yes. Who is that?
Alex Margolis, Anita Schwerner, and Peter Ungaro.
Okay.
I didn't hear.
Can you say it again?
Alex Margolis, Anita Schwerner, and Peter Ungaro.
Okay, thank you.
So at this point, I'm not sure how to follow through on it, but do you want to?
Yeah.
That?
Yeah.
Gary? Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, I think it would be appropriate and certainly, I guess, necessary for us to take a stance on the items that Michael just talked about. So I would entertain a motion for this assessors board to take a stance on this, whether we want to endorse a single payer tax rate, or do we want to make a different recommendation?
Yeah, why don't we just like go through each bullet point individually?
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
a vote after each one. so
Okay.
that
That's a great idea.
Because
Okay,
I think when people see residential factor, they're not really sure what
Yeah.
that means.
okay.
So basically what residential factor is, if typically we recommend to keep a residential factor of 1, what that does is it allows for a single tax rate. What we present to the select board is a chart where you can shift the burden up to 150% over to the commercial class. That is going to change your residential factor, and there's a guideline for going about what that number is going to be. But at this point, you can go to 1.1, 1.2, all the way up to legally, I believe it's 1 point or 150%. In some cases, it was adjusted to 170% for I think it was Boston at one point. I could be wrong about that, but it doesn't pertain to us. So it's basically keeping a residential factor of 1, which is essentially keeping a single tax rate. So you want to do that and then move on to the next one?
So let's just say, Michael, has Stockbridge ever adjusted this?
No.
So we've always been at 1.
Historically, we've had a single tax rate.
Okay, so I just wanted to get that in the record.
And I think the other thing that's important to know is that if we did, or, well, not us, because it's ours is only a recommendation, but should the select board decide to go with the residential tax exemption, I'm guessing that the bills will not go out this year.
That's true.
And what
We've made that known all along.
Yeah, so let's focus just on this single tax rate before we get into that
Yeah.
whole
Okay.
discussion. So, so I make a motion, seeing that this has never been instituted in Stockbridge and, with the commercial not being healthy, I think we should stay the course and not do a split rate for the commercial versus.
Okay. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye, Gary.
Hi, Doug.
Aye.
Okay, so the next option that is presented to the select board and to the public is the residential tax exemption. Residential tax exemption, yes, there's been a lot of discussion about that over this year. But basically what it comes down to is that is also a shift in the tax levy. It is a shift over to the non-eligible parcels. And again, I'll go over this in detail tonight. I'm sure most people understand what this means at this point, but I will clarify it. It basically means that anyone that can prove that they are local, which in the first year is very difficult to do because we're only using an estimate, because you have to vet the process. You have to vet your entire legal list as to who we think would qualify. And then it comes to the point where if this were to be voted in, every local would have to come in one way or another, whether through email or through a letter of some sort, and prove their residency in Stockbridge. That being said, the qualifying round, or the actual people that would qualify for this, are only those that can prove that they are residents of Stockbridge. It does not pertain to renters or second homeowners. And basically what the state allows is you could start as low as you want to go. You could go 5%, 1%, all the way up to, at this point, it used to be 20%. It's 35% of the average residential value. Not to be confused with the average residential actual house value. The calculation for it is you take your total residential, which is land, everything that it's not just homes, your total residential class divided by the number, and that comes up with the average, which at this, I believe we're coming up with around 600,000. Whether you go with the 20% or 35%. So I give examples and I'd go over those tonight of the 20% versus the 35%. Obviously, the higher amount you go with, the more savings is coming off of each tax bill. And so after the calculation is done, whether it's whatever percentage they would decide to take, that amount comes off of every single eligible bill, which again, is only for basically locals that can prove their residencies. What also happens is because you have to multiply how many, I believe we're calculating around 656. And that is such a rough number because again, we don't have the luxury at this point or the time to vet the entire tax rolls to come up with an accurate number because that needs to be done through an application process. So we're using an estimate, as we typically do, against the number at each amount that's coming off of each eligible parcel. That total amount is still part of your levy. It's now being shifted around. You're still raising the same amount of money to run the town. Your raise and appropriate is the same amount. But because you just eliminated that value from every eligible account, it has to be made up somewhere, and it's made up in the tax rate. So the tax rate for everybody, except for the commercial, industrial, personal property, because they're not part of the residential exemption, would then change from what we're actually hoping it comes in at, which is 814. There's no way it can stay at that. It will go up. Will it go up to what the amount is from last year? Probably not, because our values went up so much. However, that would have a huge impact on those that do not qualify. Those that do not qualify, there is a threshold of where that value is where you're going to end up paying more than you did last year. And with the way that the valuations changed and with an increase in the tax rate, that could be severe for a lot of parcels. That's the trade-off is you're shifting around the levy, but the only way to make up for that loss that's coming off of every parcel is to increase the tax rate for everybody, even those that received the adjustment. And if they are at the threshold where their valuation is higher than the norm, you could end up paying more on your taxes, even with the exemption. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And the select board has the option to put that in place. Now, getting back to your question about the tax bills, this is an untried and untested vote for something like this. We've never done it before. There's, I think, only 16 communities in Massachusetts that do. And again, these are facts. This is not my opinion. This is well known. We've called other communities and talked to them and how it's handled. And being so late in the game this year, because of our revaluation, which is something that is well known, it takes a while to get that done. We're now heading towards December without knowing what our game plan is to get the tax bills out without a residential exemption, but definitely not knowing what the game plan is if the residential exemption is implemented. And again, that's not to deter or put any opinion in. That's just, again, a fact that there is no way we would be able to. We know we would have to implement it if it's voted in. That's not in question. But what is in question is the timetable for implementing such a radical change in how we do our billing. And that, again, there's no mystery that it would hold up our first semi-annual bill that usually goes out and is out by this time already. That's it in a nutshell. Did you want me to go into the small commercial exemption or?
Well, let's take a look
Okay.
at this before we jump into any other stuff.
All right, okay. So that's basically it with the residential exemption.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we do not support implementing the residential tax exemption this year.
I second that.
All those in favor? Aye, Gary.
Aye, Doug.
And there's actually there's two more options. But we don't really get into the open space one because we don't have any valuations that are typically in class 2, which is open space. It's all under residential. So we bypass that one. And the small commercial exemption is the third option.
So just to confirm, but the selectmen still have to technically vote on that?
No,
Okay.
no. The small commercial exemption, they would only vote on it if we had, parcels that are in those categories. The small commercial exemption allows for, well, first of all, the way it starts off is we get a list from the state employment offices telling us how many businesses in Stockbridge have 10 employees or less. And we use that list to basically vet the number that we're going to put into our calculation. And it seems to always hover around 10 or 11. Last year it was 10. This year it's 10. What the small commercial exemption is, it allows up to a 10% deduction off of each eligible parcel that we determine from that list. And that, so there's 10 parcels. We have to take those 10 parcels and actually find the valuation, the new valuation. That total valuation is what is going to come off of that class. However, there's the facts on small commercial exemption is even though that report is based off of the businesses that are in these buildings, the businesses do not benefit at all from this. The exemption goes back to the owner of those properties. And at this point, our commercial, industrial, and personal property class is actually below 10%. So there's such a small class of properties that are in those categories to begin with that, again, shifting over to something like that, I don't see as feasible. We're not growing out our commercial, industrial, and personal property base. It's pretty much hovered around the numbers that we've had for many, many years. And if there are sales that occur, which are very, very rare, then we will look at and adjust some of those properties. So in this, it's a simple calculation. What will happen is it does create, again, an automatic shift in your residential versus your commercial, industrial, and personal property tax rates. It would also, what it would do, it would adjust, not by much, but it would still adjust what we're hoping can be the lowest residential tax rate possible that we can go with. It would bring that up from 814 to make up for I think we calculated 9.7 million that would come off of those values. That's not a huge amount. So I just feel that in this, and again, these are statements and facts that something like this, when you have such a small commercial industrial property class, you're not really seeing the full benefit of an exemption like this.
So you're sort of saying that only 10 taxpayers would benefit from this change?
That's it.
And it would affect the tax rate that everybody else pays?
Yes.
It would go up approximately maybe 13 cents.
Yes, not a huge amount, but again, in a time where the commercial valuations aren't seeing, I mean, they will see an increase, there's no doubt, because we did have a few sales, but historically, their valuations have been very, very consistent. And so again, shifting that over to the residential class, when we're trying to keep that rate as low, I can see something like this being possible in a community that has, anything above maybe 25% CIP, commercial and industrial personal property, but ours hovers at 10%. It's such a low number compared to the overall tax levy.
And then has Stockbridge ever used this before?
Never.
Okay. I make a motion that we maintain status quo and not suggest that the town implement the small commercial exemption for the upcoming year.
All those, I vote, yes.
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 To not implement.
To not,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that takes care of number 5. Number 6. So we haven't talked about this in a while, but.
So Michael, just
Yeah.
to, how is that information going to be shared with the select board and the taxpayers?
So when I give my presentation tonight, typically in that packet, I do have a little blurb that says, the Board of Assessors would, recommend blah, blah, blah. And this year I wasn't able to put that in there because I typically get this information to the Board of Selectmen a few days prior to the meeting. But I did, I just want to make everybody aware that I will be mentioning the recommendations tonight at the meeting.
Should we send an email out?
Either that, or can you do that same letter that you normally do and just pass it out tonight? That additional page?
Sure. Yeah. I could do
I mean,
that.
just make that available.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you should send it out via email.
Sure.
And then have it available for tonight too.
Yeah.
You send it to the select board?
Yeah,
Okay,
Give them a heads up.
I think it's fair.
I will do that.
And town administrator.
Okay, so number 6, information request from Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum. Monday was the deadline that we gave for response to the multiple questions that we had to determine whether or not the board is going to vote a tax exempt status for the Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum. I did get an email. And I'll just read, they do apologize for the delay and they are in their final edits of their response and will have it to us within the next couple of days. So we will be getting those hopefully by the end of the week. And we can put it on our next agenda to review that. Now, because we're already heading towards our final printing of bills and we can't actually change anything for
Right.
fiscal year 23. However, if you were to meet after the bills go out and it's still within the abatement period, they would have the opportunity to file abatement. And you can use the questions as part of your decision on that abatement. Excuse me. And that brings us again to Tom, update on tax exemption pilot program.
No update since Monday.
Okay. And that brings us to number 8, questions or comments from our live audience or Zoom audience. There's nobody here, so. Does anybody have any questions about what we went over?
Are they able to respond?
Okay. I guess that's it then.
Okay. Thank you all for attending. And at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, just one thing. So just so everybody knows, the tax classification hearing is tonight. It'll be in the selectman's office and I believe it's at 6:30.
Yes. Yeah, I've been told that it is going to be in this office and there's an overflow room as well. It will not be in the gymnasium.
Okay.
And the simple fact is that's because of the ability to Zoom.
Yes, yeah, they're anticipating many,
Yeah. Okay,
many Zoomers.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so with that said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.